You know what they say? In the history of the world, there's been more war over religion than anything else. Except there hasn't been any at all. Never. Seriously, I'm going to say this again and expand on it because that's not what you've probably heard growing up as an unchurched, unreligious person in secular culture. I heard that all the time. It's one of those common knowledge things that everybody knows. Everybody knows. There's been more war over religion than anything else. It's the source of all this division. And the truth is, there has never, in the history of the entire world, been a war exclusively over religion. Now, I preface that with exclusively. There are several things that make up a nation state. There's the territory, the land in which you live. There's usually a common history, therefore, a common culture, a common language, a common government, and usually a common race or a common ethnicity and a common religion. Therefore, in patriotic times, in times of existential crisis, when you look to the things that bind you together, they're going to be things like your culture, your nation, your language, your history, your race, your religion. So religion becomes useful propaganda throughout history from time to varying degrees. But nobody actually says, oh, hey, let's just, we don't like those people that live several mountaintops away because of their religion. Let's go over there and murder all of those people. It just does not happen. It's not how it works. Even in those go-to things you might go to, the real obvious ones, the rise of Islam, maybe that's not so obvious because people ignore that all the time to blame the Crusades on Christians, the rise of the Islamic Empire and the Christian Crusades. Well, the rise of the Islamic Empire is sort of religious. The religion of Muhammad, when he rejects Christianity and finds himself rejected by Judaism, he creates a religion for those people which he views as disenfranchised. It's a religion of the Arab population, the various small city areas plus wandering populations of various types of Bedouins, the people of the Holy Land and the Middle East, the people that always were sort of caught between the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire, people that were always in the middle of the struggles between great empires to control the trade that went from Africa through Sinai all the way the Silk Road into China, controlling that trade, controlling that wealth, controlling those borders, and people always finding themselves who were trapped between that, being victimized by this struggle. Having something that unified them despite their differences in ethnicity and language, sometimes race, their background, their basic geographical region in which they lived or which they wandered or led their herds and their flocks. Bringing these people together in some sort of national unity, what could do that? The new religion did that. The new religion provided them with a very practical unity against the vast empires around them that were in their own ways in various phases of decay and struggle. What emerges within a few centuries then is a vast Islamic empire that will stretch from Mesopotamia through Spain, into Africa, into Asia, you name it. Because nations require a geography, a race and ethnicity, a history, a language, or a religion, things to create nations out of and which solidify a nation. Islam is a nationalistic ideology, sort of masquerading as a religion or containing religious elements, which allowed them to forge all those disparate groups trapped between those empires into a powerful nation, powerful enough that a relatively technologically primitive and disparate group of people built a massive land empire by conquering the empires around them, no longer being trapped between them, becoming the masters of them and spreading their own imperialism. Really, the religion, though a huge component of the preaching and teaching of Muhammad, was the propaganda that gave it glue, but it wasn't really about that. people that were not abused or trapped between great powers, people that didn't yearn for some sort of unity or identity to help them build something bigger in self-defense or to even expand and themselves exploit the trade going through their area. People that didn't have those aspirations would have not responded to the message as clearly as they did. It's ultimately about stopping your abuse at the hands of empires by conquering those empires and then becoming the conqueror yourself and spreading your own empire. The Christian Crusades, wars of self-defense against centuries of Islamic invasion, conquest, and abuse in Christian lands. After the fall of the empire in the West, Christian groups were disparate. The nations that emerged, the little princedoms and fiefdoms, and the one thing they had in common that gave them a sense of nationalism was their Christianity, and other Christians being abused by the spread of Islam helped them to rally their cause. Invading the Holy Land is not an invasion of conquest. It is an act of self-defense that says the best way to do this is to get the head of the snake and cut it off. If we can capture the land they come from and control that, we can stop the tentacles from spreading out around the world. Rather than piecemeal go after them in Africa or try to go around and go into Persia from the north or around to Afghanistan, they did the logical thing and hit them right in the heart by going to the Holy Land to recover that with its Roman history and its Jewish history and its Christian history, to give them the inroad, the beachhead into that land where they could get Islam in check and protect Europe. Religion has an infinitesimally small amount really to do with that. Well, I guess you could say it was huge for propaganda and unity purposes, but the reason for going there and conquering any area, fighting any territory, seizing any, all of that was completely military, strategic, and it was self-defense and defensive. And this is the most obvious example, the rise of Islam and the Crusades. Religion is a minor component used for the propaganda or the ideology involved. What exactly makes that the basis of conflict? When then has there ever been a war over religion? And again, there has not been. There has never been a war exclusively over religion. Very primitive cultures that would get into conflicts over hunting grounds and bring out various totems and idols before them that they worshipped were fighting over hunting grounds because resources were scarce, and wars are over resources. With the Christian Reformation in Europe, there are several armed conflicts between Catholic and Protestant, but they're not really about the doctrine. They're about the problem of social cohesion against the Turk and against Islam, the question of politics and who's going to have power then, and it will go on that way for some centuries of different power bases emerging based on the doctrine of this or that leader and who's in power. And you don't go in and wipe out some Bible teaching reformer and his disciples because he's talking about the Bible. You do it because you're afraid that it's going to leach away from your power and your power base. Religion is, again, a very minor or even non-existent component. Ultimately, wars are not fought over religion. They're not even fought over any concept of national identity except the question of who has access to resources. As resources are scarce or increasingly scarce in various parts of the world, the increasing amount of tension between nations, who's going to control the resources. This goes all the way back in Genesis, the battle of the various kings around Sodom and Gomorrah and around Mesopotamia, who, as the climate is changing, are looking for resources, competing with one another. The rise of that power base, the bigger the city-states, the more fields you need around it to feed food into the city as the population grows. This is what humans do. We are colonies of people that harvest resources to support our population, which will then grow and develop and evolve technologically. But we're still going to need resources until we run up against one another. And yes, always, you feed your family before you feed someone else's. It doesn't matter how charitable you think you are, you're absolutely pathologically damaged if you give away food that your kids need to eat. Most of us know this, again, unless we're abnormal sight. We know that if you've got food, you feed you and yours before you ever consider helping out the outsider. Nation states do the same. You compete for resources, sometimes then arguing over where is the border, who's the property line belong to, where do the resources go. These are reasons for having war and struggle with one another. The enemy's going to come after us to steal our resources. We better get at them preemptively. These are reasons to have armed conflict. There's no war fought over religion. It's always a subtext, a useful part of something much broader and really much simpler.